To adults, 10 years might not seem like a long time. It can feel like it goes by in the blink of an eye. But in that time, my daughter, who was once in elementary school, has grown up and is now old enough to be an adult with a job. My husband, Paul, left us on his own and has been living with his parents for 10 years now, neglecting his responsibilities as a father. My mother-in-law, who allowed this, is no different. Even if they offered me a house where all our generations could live together, what they probably want from me is just to be their housekeeper. It's too late now, even if they start acting friendly because they sense money coming their way. I've spent the last decade raising my child alone, unlike Paul, who has wasted his time. My name is Judy. I'm 53 years old, a full-time housewife with a part-time job. My only daughter, Hannah, who lives at home while attending university, recently got a job offer and will start working next year. I worry about her because she's still inexperienced in the ways of the world, but I'm happy she has grown up well. Raising a child seemed to go by in a flash, but I still have her student loan to repay. For over 20 years, I've put my daughter first, but now I wonder what my life will be like from here on. It might be nice to travel, enjoy hobbies, or join the gym I've always wanted to go to. However, around this time, both of my parents passed away. Their death was sudden. They died instantly in a rear-end collision. It was so unexpected that I had no time to grieve, as I was busy with funeral preparations and dealing with inheritance matters. After meeting with the tax accountant and things had calmed down, I finally broke down in tears and realized I should let my husband know. I picked up my phone and called him, but there was no answer. Of course, he wouldn't pick up. I had tried several times before the funeral, but he never responded. I sent messages, but he didn't reply. After several attempts, I got busy and forgot about him. More than a week passed. I don't consider myself heartless for not thinking about my husband at such a time. In fact, it's been years since he stopped coming home. He's not missing. He's living at his parents' house. Since he left on his own, he has kept his distance from me. It's troublesome and annoying when I can't reach him in an emergency. I can only leave a message on his parents' home phone. I was confused when he first left. I don't really know why he left since he refused to talk to me about it, but I stopped caring once I got busy with childcare and work. It seemed pointless to try to understand someone who would go to such lengths to abandon his family. From the beginning of our marriage, he prioritized his own family over us. We argued about this many times. Even when I stressed that we had our own family to take care of, he would break his promises whenever his mother asked for a favor. It didn't matter if we had plans or a trip booked. I did feel like he tried to contribute to the family when our daughter was young, but when she became a teenager and grew distant from him, things changed. That year, his mother suddenly hurt her back, and though there was a lot of snow and my daughter and I had colds, he decided to help his parents instead and never came back. I don't know how a man who couldn't do any household chores was useful, but my mother-in-law insisted he could stay as long as he wanted. She spoiled him, and he got comfortable living with his parents. To her, I was the bad daughter-in-law who took her precious son away. Since I had no choice, I called my husband's parents' house. My mother-in-law answered the phone. "Hello, Mother. It's Judy. Is Paul there? I can't reach him. What's wrong? I need to talk to him. Can you put him on the line, please? What do you need to talk to him about? I'll let him know." This was the usual conversation, which is why I haven't spoken directly to my husband in years. Actually, my parents have passed away. What? Considering the situation, we had a small funeral with only close family and friends. Why didn't you tell me about this important thing right away? I tried several times. I can't believe this. How could you lack such common sense? I had no idea what she was talking about. What did she mean by common sense? It's outrageous. Why would you wait to tell me until after the funeral is over? That's why By the way, what will you do with your parents' house? We're gathering as a family this weekend to sort things out. My mother-in-law paused for a moment and said, "The big house?" "Yes, it might take some time since the house is huge." I see. My mother-in-law laughed in a strange way. "Do you have something to say?" "No, not at all. It's nothing." "Is that so? Then I'll excuse myself." After hanging up, my daughter, Hannah, looked at me with concern. "Are you okay? You look upset." "There's no need to force yourself to contact Grandma or Dad. You're too diligent, Mom," my daughter said, worried. "It's not that simple. You have way too much sense of obligation, Mom," she said. I responded to her concern. I didn't want people to think I was being unreasonable, but inside I was furious. I even thought about cutting ties with my in-laws completely. However, I knew that to my daughter, Paul was still her only father, so it wasn't that simple to break away from them. The weekend arrived and my daughter and I went to my family home to help with the cleanup. My siblings and I all played our parts, and the work progressed steadily. Clearing out a house that no one had lived in was harder than I imagined, so we decided to leave the larger furniture and appliances for a professional service to handle. Suddenly, I got a call from my mother-in-law, which was unusual. She cheerfully asked, "Judy, how's the cleanup going? Is everything all right?" It was like she had good news. Then she added, "Actually, I'm busy with something urgent right now and won't be able to make it today, sorry for that." I wasn't expecting her to come help anyway. We've barely seen each other since my husband left, so why would she say something like that? I didn't think she even knew where my family home was. I said, "It's okay, please don't worry about it." "Don't be shy, we're family, so it's natural to help each other out," she continued. Normally, my mother-in-law is self-centered, but she seemed to be showing some understanding this time. I decided to genuinely accept her offer. "By the way, when you said you're tidying up the house, you mean sorting through belongings, right?" "Yes, there are so many things and it's quite a hassle," I replied. "Right, it must be difficult to be surrounded by so many things." "Yes, especially with dresses and artworks. It's really challenging when there are items we don't know what to do with." "I see, that sounds wonderful." Suddenly, I felt a chill as I realized my mother-in-law's true intentions. I was foolish to think she was genuinely concerned. How could she have been worried about not being able to help? "Is that all you wanted to discuss?" I asked. "Actually, I was curious about how much your parents left behind." "What?" I was shocked. "Well, it's my turn next after all. I just wanted to know, merely for reference." "That varies from one family to another." "Well, yes, but it wouldn't hurt to tell me a little, would it?" I couldn't hold back my irritation. In the 10 years we hadn't seen each other, my mother-in-law seemed to have grown more greedy. My parents had clearly stated in their will that the inheritance would be divided equally among us siblings. Needless to say, my mother-in-law had no right to interfere. "Let's make this clear. The inheritance will be divided into 3, so it has nothing to do with you, Mother. I'm busy right now, so I'll excuse myself." With that, I ended the call. Her attitude was extremely rude. My parents had just passed away, and instead of offering condolences, she only asked about the inheritance. My daughter, who had been tidying up another room, came over. "Was that Grandma on the phone?" "Yes, it was." "What happened?" "Nothing for you to worry about," I replied with a forced smile, but my daughter looked slightly displeased. "I'm an adult now, you know. Stop treating me like a child." I hadn't meant to treat her that way, but her assertive response surprised me. Indeed, she was now old enough to be treated as a full-fledged adult. I felt a mix of happiness and an indescribable sense of loneliness. "Mom, I know what's going on." "What do you mean?" "If my guess is right, I want you to make one promise." "A promise? What kind?" That's when I made a special promise with my daughter. A week passed and the house cleanup was nearly finished. I was thinking of returning to work when the doorbell rang. Thinking it was the delivery guy, I opened the door to an unpleasant surprise. I should have checked first. If I had known who it was, I wouldn't have opened the door. Standing there was my mother-in-law, and next to her, a loose, unshapely figure with thinning hair fluttering in the breeze. It was a middle-aged man wearing a stretched-out sweatshirt, looking filthy, my spouse Paul. I couldn't believe it when I saw who was at the door. I tried to close it, saying they had the wrong address, but my mother-in-law quickly said, "Don't joke around, Judy." It was shocking to see them here without any notice. My mother-in-law, who always stayed close to her son, seemed unusually cheerful. She walked confidently into the house. "Wait, Mother." I called out, but my husband followed her inside. Even though it was technically his home too, it felt strange after a 10-year absence. He was practically a stranger to me now, and I certainly didn't want to welcome him in, especially looking so unkempt. "I have a surprise for you, Judy. I thought you'd be pleased," my mother-in-law said cheerfully. My husband sat down next to her. "Oh, I'd like some coffee, please. Paul, how about you?" "I'll have tea. Judy, please bring us some." I couldn't believe their audacity. How could my husband, who left without a word and lived with his parents for 10 years, Now demand tea as if nothing had happened. I wanted to scream, but I kept my composure and asked, "What's the occasion? What's wrong, Judy? Make it quick," my mother-in-law replied. "If you have no business here, please leave," I said calmly. "What a rude daughter-in-law," she muttered, but I felt no obligation to be polite to someone who showed up after 10 years, following their own whims. Just then, my daughter Hannah came downstairs. "It's been so long, Grandma." Her eyes widened in surprise. Even my husband seemed shocked by her reaction. "Hannah, you've grown so much." Who are you?" she asked, not recognizing the man next to her grandmother. "It's me, Dad," my husband said. "Wait, Dad?" Hannah was understandably confused. She hadn't seen him since she was in elementary school. "Sit down here," her father instructed, pointing to the seat next to him. "No, absolutely not," Hannah replied, stepping back. "I have a unique condition that makes me ill if I don't stand. Don't worry about it." I felt sorry for my daughter, suddenly facing this awkward situation. "Take a look at this," my mother-in-law said, pulling out architectural plans from an envelope. The plans showed a luxurious home with enough rooms for 4 families, a rooftop garden, and even a catalog for luxury cars. "How do you like it?" she asked. "What is this?" I asked, confused. "It's our new home, isn't it wonderful?" My mother-in-law said, expecting my agreement. She added, "You can choose the kitchen and utilities, Judy, since you'll be the one using them." "Using them? What do you mean?" I asked. "I recently realized we should live together as a family. Since we just happened to come into some money, don't you agree it's the perfect time?" she explained. "I don't know the specifics, but how does this involve me?" I questioned. "We're family, aren't we? I believe family possessions should be shared," she replied. It became clear to me that my mother-in-law was out of control. Desperate to understand the situation, I turned to my husband. "What do you think?" But they just exchanged looks and nodded silently. Then my mother-in-law whispered something to him, like they were having a secret meeting. Finally, my husband spoke up. "Seems like it's time for me to return home." I was confused and let out a sound. "With the $3 million we inherited, I'm thinking of building a 2-family house to live there with my parents," he said smugly. My mother-in-law nodded, pleased. "Did you hear that, Mom? It's just like I said," my daughter exclaimed. I couldn't help but laugh. "Really? It turned out just as you said, Hannah. You're amazing," I said, and we shared a laugh. The atmosphere lightened, and even my mother-in-law and husband seemed pleased. "I'm glad you two agree. The construction date is already set, and all that's left is to pay the down payment," my mother-in-law said. But Hannah confronted them. "You're completely wrong, Grandma, Dad. Don't you think you're being a bit too oblivious? Even if you say you want to live together, I absolutely refuse to take care of the 2 of you, who have troubled Mom for years." My mother-in-law was shocked. "What? Mom, I won the bet, so keep your promise," Hannah said energetically. All right, I agreed. As we discussed the situation, my mother-in-law suddenly asked, "What do you mean, what promise?" My daughter, Hannah, responded sharply, "Grandma, it seems you can't tell the difference between what's yours and what's not. We bet on whether you were after the inheritance." "Huh? What does that mean?" My mother-in-law asked, puzzled. "If you could tell the difference, you would have told Dad to go back to his own home long ago. But you always said families should stay together," Hannah explained. Then my husband suddenly raised his voice. "I left this house because of you two." My daughter and I exchanged confused looks, not understanding what he was getting at. "I would have forgiven you immediately if you had just apologized. I was waiting for just one word from you both," he continued. "Wait, you lost me. What do you mean?" I asked. "You told me to leave, Judy," he said. I tried to recall but couldn't remember ever telling him to leave. "Have you really forgotten that snowy night when I came home tired from work, and you told me to leave?" Finally, I remembered a faint memory. That night, Hannah and I were bedridden with a cold. He came home without bringing anything and asked, "What's for dinner?" I had simply asked him to dine out. To think he held on to that for years drained the strength out of me. How trivial was that? "Is that really what happened?" I asked, still confused. "Yes, and that's why I'm baffled." "Why did you leave it like that?" he said. "It's your fault. I tried to contact you many times," I responded, looking at my mother-in-law, who smirked with guilt for not relaying the messages. "Apologize and I'll forgive everything. Let's forget the past and start fresh as a family," he said. At this, Hannah couldn't contain her laughter. "Dad, didn't you know? Mom has been preparing for divorce for 5 years." "What?" he asked, shocked. "The promise I made with my daughter was to get divorced if my mother-in-law was acting out of greed for the inheritance. It would mean endless troubles ahead, prompting me to make my own decisions," I explained, feeling relieved as if shedding a heavy burden I had carried for years. "Don't joke around. Do you think you can just submit a divorce application unilaterally?" my husband retorted angrily. "Long-term no contact and separation are grounds for divorce," I calmly replied. "What does that mean? Didn't you know I thought I was fulfilling my duties as a father by sending money? The amount was too insignificant. Do you think children can be raised on money alone? How can you say you've fulfilled your role as a father after neglecting your family for 10 years? A mother is supposed to take care of the kids," he muttered. "There's no point in talking to you." "Yes, I raised her by myself, and we didn't need you," I said. "You were absent for school events, pickups, and preparing lunches. Even when I was sick, the husband I should have relied on was absent. Your presence was unnecessary then, and it still is." "Let's send this," I said, referring to the divorce papers. "Wait, are you serious? What are you planning to do from now on, Judy? Please help. What should Paul and I do when we get older?" my mother-in-law pleaded, trembling with fear. "You're essentially asking Hannah and me to be your helpers or caregivers?" I asked. "No, that's not what I meant. I don't know what to tell you unless I have something I owe you. What about the $3 million inheritance? Let's use it more effectively," my mother-in-law said desperately. "Where did the $3 million come from? If it's divided among siblings, that implies a $9 million inheritance. That couldn't be possible," I responded, confused. "It's a misunderstanding. There wasn't such a large sum in the first place. Even if there were, I would never build a house for us to live together," I declared firmly, facing my bewildered mother-in-law and tearful husband. "Judy, are you really going to leave me behind?" my husband pleaded. "Continue living at your beloved parents' home as you wish." "Goodbye," I said, resolute. 3 months passed. My ex-husband's ceaseless demands for reconciliation bordered on stalking. His lengthy messages, sent over 20 times a day, went unread. When I hinted at legal action, he backed down. The divorce papers were finally processed without issue. Looking back, my ex-husband and mother-in-law's self-centered imaginations led them to believe others should take care of them. It was a pitiful sight. Even Hannah is striving to become independent. She plans to move out and live on her own after getting a job, a suggestion I made. Though I'll be lonely, it will be a great experience for her to understand the value of money, time, and family. As for myself, I've been offered a full-time position at the company where I worked part-time. After the task of raising a child ended, they strongly recommended me. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Following the divorce, I'm studying diligently to get a certification, excited about this new journey. When I shared the news with my daughter, she said, "Mom, you're like a new employee, just like me." We laughed together. Time flows equally for everyone, but how we spend those 10 years varies. There will be enjoyable times and moments when things don't go as planned. Maybe after another 10 years, some conclusions will be reached. I plan to live freely, just as my daughter wished for me. I hope you do the same.
Get out. My mother-in-law, Catherine's harsh words hit me like a cold wind when it was decided that my husband would be sent to work in another country. Catherine took our house away from me and my little girl. With no place to go, I ended up in the park, holding my 2-year-old daughter, feeling lost and unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, police officers surrounded us. "Please come with us to the station," they said as rain poured down, making me shiver from the cold. Reluctantly, I followed them to the police station. There, I was surprised to see someone unexpected waiting for me. "My name is Emma, and I'm turning 35 this year. I met my husband Bob at work, and after dating for a year, we got married. When we had our daughter Lily 2 years ago, I stopped working. Now, I live with Bob, Lily, and my mother-in-law Catherine. We used to rent a place, But after Catherine's husband passed away and she started having trouble with her knees, we decided to live together and bought a new apartment. We thought it would be best to live somewhere with good transportation access because of Catherine's knees. Buying an apartment was cheaper than a house at the time, and it has an elevator, which makes life easier. Catherine also preferred the apartment, so we made a down payment and took out a 35-year loan. Bob's job often requires him to travel or relocate, but since we bought the apartment, we were told he wouldn't be transferred for a while. However, he travels for work more than other employees, about once a week to other states. Having a 2-year-old daughter, I feel really stressed when my husband Bob goes on his business trips. At first, my mother-in-law Catherine was helpful, but now she doesn't help with taking care of our daughter at all. Instead, she makes more work for me. For example, she eats and leaves her dirty dishes lying around, and she doesn't rinse cooking utensils after using them. I'm often busy with our daughter, so by the time I notice, the food is stuck to the dishes, making them hard to clean. Even when I ask her to at least rinse them, she just says sorry and promises to do better next time, but she doesn't. I notice that she rinses the dishes when my husband is around, but not when I'm alone. This made me think that Catherine is intentionally making things difficult for me. Sometimes, when she asks if I need anything from the store and I say no, she later tells me she actually needed something, which happens a lot. I used to try to help Catherine a lot because of her bad knees, but now I'm feeling less inclined to do so because of her behavior. I thought about talking to my husband Bob about it, but he's already stressed from work, so I didn't want to add to his worries. Catherine's behavior started soon after we moved in together, and it's been going on for years now. When I talked to a friend about it, she said it sounds like Catherine is bullying me and suggested I talk to Bob about it. But I worry that if I do, Catherine, who doesn't have any other family, might end up in a care facility. So I thought it might be better to just deal with it. However, one day, something happened that made me reconsider. That day, I planned to drop off my daughter Lily at my parents' house. They love having Lily over for sleepovers. Thanks for always bringing Lily. We love having her here. Why do you stay over sometimes too? My mom suggested. I'd love to, but I'm worried about leaving Catherine alone. I'll head home. Just don't spoil Lily with too many toys, I replied. After a nice chat, I left and headed back to our apartment where Catherine was waiting. When I got back, I realized I had forgotten my keys inside. At first, I was worried, but then I remembered Catherine was home. I tried calling her using the intercom, but there was no answer. Maybe she had gone out. I decided to wait outside for a while. But even after waiting for 2 hours until it got dark, Catherine didn't come back. When another resident returned and unlocked the main entrance, I followed them in. Catherine rarely goes out at night, so I was sure she was still at home. I rang the intercom again, but still no response. I could hear a faint sound from inside, confirming Catherine was there. I tried a few more times, but she refused to answer. Feeling defeated, I decided to stay at a nearby motel for the night and planned to sort things out when my husband Bob returned from his trip. What happened? Out shopping. I told Bob that Catherine had locked me out. He was understandably upset for me, but Catherine just brushed it off, saying, "Oh, maybe I didn't hear you because of my hearing. I'm getting old, you know," with a smirk on her face. I was relieved to be back inside. After getting my keys, I went to pick up Lily from my parents' house. When I talked to my parents about what happened, they said, "Sounds like Catherine is making things difficult for you. If it gets too much, you can always come back here." Their comforting words brought tears to my eyes, but I quickly wiped them away before heading home with Lily. For a while, things seemed okay with Catherine. But then, out of nowhere, Bob's international transfer became final. It was a permanent move, not just a short business trip. We finally bought a place, and now this international assignment. "What do you think?" Bob asked me. "I think it's best for you and Lily to stay in the US, I replied. But when he asked if I could handle living with my mom, I hesitated. Thinking about the potential stress it could cause Lily, I decided it would be better for us to stay in the US. After we made that decision, Bob had to leave for Europe. Although he was worried about us, he was really busy with work, so it was just me, Lily, and Catherine at home. But things quickly went downhill once Bob left for Europe. Catherine's attitude completely changed. On a stormy day when it wasn't safe to go outside, Catherine dropped a bombshell on me. "Now that Bob's gone, wouldn't it be better if you and Lily move out?" she said. "Excuse me? What do you mean?" I asked, shocked. "Just what I said. I'll take over from here. I just feel I can't relax with strangers in the house. I'd appreciate it if you could leave right now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Catherine's request felt like a slap in the face. Despite not being blood relatives, I had always treated her like family and tried my best to make our living situation comfortable. But to Catherine, it seemed like we were just unwanted guests. As I contemplated gathering our belongings and returning to my parents' place, Catherine uttered, "Instead of wasting time, why did you just leave?" Before I could react, Lily and I found ourselves standing outside, still in our everyday clothes, evicted from our own home. No matter how hard I knocked on the door, Catherine refused to let us back in. Lost and bewildered, I carried Lily through the pouring rain to a nearby park. Thankfully, there was a shelter there that provided some relief from the rain. Ideally, I would have checked into a motel or gone back to my parents' house. But I had left my wallet and phone inside. Feeling helpless, I sat in the park, trying to figure out what to do next. Time seemed to blur as the rain continued to pour down. Exhausted and cold, I started to drift off to sleep despite the darkness and biting cold. I worried about Lily catching a cold. As terrible as it seemed, the only option I could think of was to walk to my parents' house, even though it would take 3 hours. As I sat there pondering our predicament, I noticed 2 faint lights in the distance coming closer. Due to the rain, it was hard to see clearly, but I could make out that they were from 2 police officers. I thought maybe they could offer some assistance, but before I could approach them, one of the officers called out to me. "Are you Emma? And is this little one Lily?" the officer asked. Surprised by their recognition, I weakly replied, "Yes, that's us." "Please come to the station with us," the officer said. "Why, the police station?" I asked, feeling puzzled. Wondering if something was wrong, Lily and I followed the officer's instructions and got into the patrol car. We were shivering from being out in the rain for so long, but the officers had brought large towels to help keep us warm. "You might need these. We've got some spare clothes back at the station for you," they said kindly. Curious about why they knew about us and why we were headed to the police station, I asked, "How did you know where to find us?" They replied, "We'll explain everything once we're back at the station. For now, just try to relax." Exhausted, I soon drifted off to sleep and woke up to find that we had arrived at the police station. Following the officers inside, I was surprised to see Catherine and my uncle waiting there. "Uncle, what are you doing here?" I asked, puzzled by his presence. "He was contacted by Bob," my uncle explained. "Bob suspected you might be having problems with his mom, and since he's overseas, he asked me to keep an eye on things for him." According to my uncle, Bob had talked to him about this issue previously. He said Bob had asked him to keep an eye on things because he couldn't be there himself. My uncle had seen us out in the rain earlier today. He had considered taking us in himself, but he thought Catherine's actions were extreme, so he decided to report it to the police. That's how the officers knew where to find us and came to help. Catherine had also been summoned to the police station. She sat on a sofa, glaring at me, appearing unaware of why she was there. "Why do I have to be here? My knee is bad, you know. If Bob was here, this wouldn't be happening," Catherine argued. But the whole situation stemmed from Bob asking my uncle for help. In discussions with the police, it seemed likely that there could be legal consequences. Therefore, I was advised to consider hiring a lawyer. That's an exaggeration. I just locked the door, that's all. I didn't do anything else, Catherine defended herself. "Do you even realize what you've done? You threw Emma and a little child out in pouring rain. That's unforgivable," my uncle defended us. asserting that I was the rightful owner of the house. That's impossible. Bob is the head of the household. He's the rightful owner. Now that he's not here, it should be mine, Catherine argued. Catherine believed Bob was the owner, but she was mistaken. In fact, my uncle, who runs a real estate business, helped us get a great deal on a condo. Bob suggested putting the property under my name. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I'm grateful I listened to Bob's advice. Following my uncle's guidance, I decided to hire a lawyer. The lawyer explained that it would be difficult to remove Catherine from the house. Therefore, the best option might be to place her in a care facility. Upon hearing the lawyer's advice, I immediately called Bob to explain the situation. Bob hadn't realized the situation had escalated so much and said he wanted to return from Japan to discuss it properly. He also mentioned he was considering placing Catherine in a facility. Meanwhile, Catherine, oblivious to all this, was snacking on crackers casually at the police station. Since I couldn't return home with Catherine, I decided to stay with my parents until Bob returned. He would be back in a week, giving us time to think about our next steps. If Bob didn't support me, divorce seemed like the only option. I regretted not seeking advice sooner. A week later, Bob returned from Europe and was at the house with Catherine, so I moved back home from my parents' place. Bob had to return to Europe soon due to the urgency of his job. He could only stay in Japan for a few days, so we needed to discuss our next steps. I heard some things from Emma's uncle. Is all of that true? Bob asked. It's all lies. I haven't done anything. Emma's plotting something to evict me. Catherine stubbornly refused to admit any wrongdoing. She even accused me of scheming against her. Bob, who I expected to support me, seemed to want to consider Catherine's perspective. I understand. So do you have any evidence to prove Emma's plotting something? He asked. Evidence? Of course not, Catherine replied. I see. Emma, do you have any evidence? Bob turned to me. To be honest, I've been so busy with work, I haven't been able to keep an eye on things. I'm not sure who to believe, I admitted. I handed Bob something I had with me. What's this? He asked. It was a voice recorder I had been using. It contained recordings of Catherine's verbal abuse towards me, including the time she evicted us. When Bob played it, he heard Catherine saying hurtful things like, "Such a worthless wife. I wonder why he even married you." Hearing this, Catherine quickly began to defend herself. This is taken out of context. Everyone has their moments, right? I was just frustrated at that time, but it was just this once. As Catherine claimed this, the voice recorder played more recorded verbal abuses, showing that it wasn't just a one-time thing. Bob's hand, holding the voice recorder, trembled with tension and anger. Meanwhile, Catherine looked guilty. Mom, what is this about? Bob asked, but Catherine remained silent. If you won't answer, then I assume this is all true. If so, I need to protect Emma and Lily. You understand that, right? Bob's anger was palpable, something I had never seen in him before. Catherine, seeing this side of Bob for the first time too, looked frightened and couldn't say a word. After several discussions before Bob's return to Europe, I made it clear that I couldn't continue living with Catherine. With Lily around, I couldn't risk another incident like the one before. Bob seemed to agree, leaning towards placing Catherine in a care facility. However, Catherine strongly opposed the idea, making the discussions more complicated. Despite the opposition, I decided to sell the house. You can't stay here anymore. If you don't want the facility, you'll need to find another place, I told Catherine. How dare you decide this on your own? I won't allow you to sell the house. Catherine resisted the idea, but it was a difficult request to ignore. Lily and I had already decided to move to Europe. Bob regretted not being more present for his family and wanted to be there for us moving forward. Although I was hesitant about living abroad, knowing Bob would be with us reassured me. Plus, Lily is only 2, and it would be beneficial for her to learn and grow in Europe. Therefore, selling the condo, which still had a mortgage, was the only viable option. If we left it as it was, Catherine would have to cover the mortgage, but her fixed income wouldn't suffice. Given her future prospects, it was crucial for someone to assist her. Despite our efforts, Catherine refused to move into a facility voluntarily. So we had no choice but to arrange for her to be placed there forcefully. I'm sorry, but I have to head back to Europe. Could you handle any necessary procedures here? Bob asked before leaving. With the help of others, I managed to finalize Catherine's admission into the facility. The staff there kept me informed about her condition, but unfortunately, she wasn't doing well. It would be one thing if she were simply feeling down, but it seemed she was causing trouble for the staff and other residents. Before heading to Europe, I visited her to check on her well-being. However, she lashed out at me, accusing me of locking her up in the facility. She also complained to the staff about the food, comfort of the beds, and other residents' behavior, expressing frustration and dissatisfaction. When I apologized to the staff for Catherine's behavior, they were very understanding. It's okay, one of them assured me. We're used to dealing with this kind of behavior. Just leave it to us. We'll keep you updated, and if anything happens, we'll give you a call, so don't worry. Despite all the trouble Catherine caused me while we lived together, I couldn't help but feel concerned as I headed to Europe. When I arrived in Paris, Bob met me at the airport, and we went to the apartment we had rented. Rents in Paris are known to be higher than in Texas, but thanks to the housing allowance from Bob's company, we were lucky to find a spacious and affordable place. Living in Paris has been a delightful experience for me and Lily. Our neighbors are incredibly friendly, even though I'm still learning French. Recently, one neighbor shared wine and cheese with me, and I returned the favor with mac and cheese. I'm slowly learning French, and Lily is picking it up too. I've enrolled in a language school to improve further, where I've made friends with other Americans new to France. In the past, I had to constantly worry about Catherine back in the States, which often stopped me from fully enjoying outings with friends. But here in Paris, I can relax and enjoy leisurely lunches. My main concern now is Lily, who is still too young for kindergarten. Most kids in France start kindergarten at 5, so I hope she learns enough French by then. Luckily, Lily seems to be learning quickly. Once Lily starts preschool, I'm considering getting a job. Bob is supportive of me staying at home, but being in Paris has made me want to explore new opportunities. I've made friends with a waitress at a nearby cafe who hinted there might be a job for me there. The cafe is popular among Americans and locals learning English, so it could be a great fit. While there may be challenges ahead, living in France has strengthened our family bonds. I feel more confident expressing myself, and I believe we'll face any challenges together as a family. Overall, I've never been happier in my life. My name is Melissa. I'm 26 years old and getting ready to have my baby at home. But there's a problem. My mother-in-law doesn't seem to like me much. She says mean things about me to my husband when she thinks I can't hear. She says I'm not nice, not helpful, don't make money, and have no good qualities. I wanted to tell her off, but I'm pregnant and don't want to make things worse. So I just try to ignore her negativity and focus on taking care of myself and the baby. I'm really excited to meet my baby soon. So while I'm waiting, I take walks and talk to my belly every day. It's a happy time for me. But then my mother-in-law shows up unexpectedly and stays for too long. She complains about everything, like the food and the baby's room. Finally, my baby is born safely, and even though things are busy, I enjoy raising her in my cheerful childhood home. I tell my husband that I'll be back at his place next weekend, but secretly, I wish I could stay home a little longer. I wonder how long I can rely on others, especially since my husband isn't interested in doing housework. I thought to myself. Holding my sleeping baby Lisa in my arms, I smiled at her. "This is going to be your home, Lisa." "We need to go back and make it cozy," I whispered. When I arrived at our house with lots of bags, I hoped someone would open the door for me when I rang the bell, but nobody did. I struggled to unlock the door and went inside, only to find nobody there. I had told my husband I'd be back by now. As I walked into the living room, I was shocked by what I saw. "What? what happened here. The room was a complete mess, with stuff scattered everywhere. It wasn't just untidy. It looked like someone had deliberately made a mess. Was it a break-in? Terrified, I ran out of the house. Hello, police. I just got back from having my baby, and my house is a disaster, I said shakily into the phone, while my peacefully sleeping baby began to cry, adding to my panic. A neighbor passing by noticed our distress and kindly invited us to rest at their house. They helped me calm down from the shock and fear. After giving my daughter some milk, she fell back asleep. Soon, we heard police sirens, and I went back to my house with the neighbor by my side. The front door was still locked. I was too scared to go in after seeing the living room, so I hadn't checked the other rooms. When I explained this to the police, they commended me for being cautious. They explained that encountering a burglar can be dangerous, so it's safer to stay outside and wait for them to arrive. I hadn't thought about that in my rush, but the idea scared me now. As I finished explaining, a voice full of uncertainty spoke up. What's going on? Why are the police here? It was my mother-in-law. It's a bad situation, mother-in-law. Our house has been ransacked, and we suspect it was a burglary. The police are here to investigate, I explained before she could interrupt. I felt a sharp stain on my cheek as my mother-in-law slapped me hard. My vision blurred from the shock, and amidst the chaos of neighbors and police, I instinctively held my sore cheek. My mother-in-law's face was flushed red with anger as she yelled at me, accusing me of being shameless for calling the police about a burglary. I was stunned, unable to understand why she was so furious, especially with the pain in my cheek throbbing. A neighbor tried to intervene, explaining that calling the police was the right thing to do and it's their job to investigate, but she wouldn't listen. She went on to scold me for leaving my husband alone and going back to my parents' house during childbirth. She said I was useless if I wasn't at home doing housework. And now, she was upset that I had caused a scene by calling the police. Even though everyone around tried to reason with her and tell her it wasn't my fault, she wouldn't listen. As I tried to make sense of it all, I realized something strange. Despite our house possibly being burgled, she didn't seem concerned about any losses. And even though it was the first time she was meeting her grandchild, she didn't show any interest. Why? Everyone around me didn't seem to agree with what I was saying. That's not the point. How can you accuse me without even saying sorry? My mother-in-law completely ignored my question, sticking to her argument. Mom, what's happening? Brian, my husband, interrupted the argument, appearing quite calm. Brian, listen to this. It's awful. My mother-in-law's face lit up with delight at the sight of her beloved son. Melissa apparently called the police. Huh. Why? She's been going on about a burglary, but that's impossible. Brian, please tell her to stop being so ridiculous. My mother-in-law insisted. Is that true? Melissa, maybe you got it wrong about the burglary. It's bothering the neighbors, you know? And the police have other things to deal with, so let's send them away soon. Brian said, trying to calm things down. What? I was shocked, but for a different reason this time. Not only was my mother-in-law against me, but now my husband, Brian, seemed to be too. I couldn't believe he would say something like that. Wait, Brian, our house isn't just messy. The police are still investigating. We don't know for sure if it was a burglary yet, but something is definitely off about the state of the house. We're about to check if anything's missing and file a report. No, absolutely not. Brian interrupted me with a raised voice. But why? The conversation was becoming more confusing by the moment. I felt lost, and tears began to fill my eyes. I came back here, and nobody was here, and the room was a mess. I didn't know what happened, and I was scared. Unable to hold back my sobs, I found comfort in the embrace of a neighbor, their warmth making me cry even more. Yet in front of me, both my mother-in-law and husband seemed irritated and simply stared at me. Why? Why won't you understand? My heartache seemed to affect my daughter too, as she woke up crying. This only seemed to annoy my mother-in-law and husband even further. With the kindness of the neighbors and the concerned look of the police, I ended up spending the night at a neighbor's house. Stolen things? I don't know. Melissa's just overreacting. Let's go inside, my mother-in-law said, while my husband added, yeah, Melissa, calm down. They didn't seem to care about the mess and quickly went inside after the police finished their investigation. I didn't think he was like that, I thought, standing in front of the closed door, recalling my husband's words. My mom still treats me like a child, and it's annoying. I usually just go along with her to avoid conflict, but it's really a hassle. Despite his complaints, though, I couldn't stay outside forever. After apologizing repeatedly, I ended up spending the night at my neighbor's house. Mom needs to be strong. I'll do my best, I whispered to my daughter, who was finally falling asleep despite being fussy. The next day, when I returned home, my mother-in-law and husband were there. Did you really stay here last night with everything in such a mess? The living room was somewhat tidied up for them to sit, but it looked no different from the day before. I had checked the other rooms with the police, and it seemed like things had been thrown out of storage in all of them. The mess was everywhere. Despite always complaining about my cleaning, my mother-in-law had stayed in the house in that condition, and she hadn't lifted a finger to clean up. She just sat there, looking unhappy. What do you mean? Did you really? I felt sorry for Brian, who was abandoned by his wife, so I couldn't go home. Her words hit me, and I responded, "It's not that I left. It's that you didn't listen to what I was saying." What? How dare you speak like that? My mother-in-law's face quickly turned angry. Brian jumped in and stopped making a big deal out of the burglary. Have you calmed down now? He said it in a way that irritated me, and something inside me snapped. You're right. It's not like we were burgled, huh? I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. But Brian didn't react to my anger. He just smirked a little. Finally realized it, huh? Yeah, you were overreacting about the burglary. Anyway, start cleaning up, Brian said as if it was someone else's problem. And my mother-in-law looked smug. Cleaning and taking care of the house are a wife's duties, aren't they? My mother-in-law said this in a sickeningly sweet tone, as if talking to a pet. What? I'm not cleaning up. It's your mess, so you should clean it, I said, feeling belittled by them. What? How dare you? As expected, they didn't like my response. You're such a terrible wife. Get to work. My mother-in-law snapped at me, clearly annoyed. What a hassle, my husband grumbled in agreement. I handed them the divorce papers I had prepared and filled out first thing in the morning. I want a divorce, I said firmly. My husband blinked, looking surprised. That's right. I want a divorce right now, I declared firmly. In that instant, my mother-in-law grabbed the divorce papers and melodramatically lamented, "Oh, poor Brian, being treated like this is so awful," as she hugged my husband's head. Such a big baby, aren't you? I'd tried to bite my tongue, but my true feelings slipped out. What did you just say, Melissa? The two of them were so furious they seemed ready to explode, but I wasn't going to back down. Did you not hear me? Or are you pretending not to understand, Brian? Divorce. Sign the papers now. I knew it was petty. I knew I shouldn't stoop to their level, but I didn't care at that point. Stop joking around and apologize. Enraged, they pushed me to the ground, pinning me down. Apologize now. Brian's strength made it difficult to breathe, and tears filled my eyes. Melissa, let go of my daughter right now. My saviors were my parents rushing to my rescue. Behind them, I saw the friendly officer from the previous day, coughing and struggling for air. Relief washed over me, and my strength waned. Why are you barging in here like this? Leave immediately. My mother-in-law and husband were being held back by the officer, squirming and resisting. It's useless. You've been caught assaulting someone. With my father's help, I stood up and smiled at the two struggling figures. Actually, I just asked the officer to come and check on the situation from yesterday. I never expected you to attack me. What? What's happening? My husband growled, but I wasn't afraid anymore. We have a baby monitor camera installed in this house for our little Lisa. It's a live stream camera. It couldn't record the person who trashed the room, but as I spoke, both of them visibly relaxed. Huh. So what if it's a live camera? I told you, right? Now, the kind neighbor who helped us yesterday is watching over this room. They listened to your conversation yesterday, along with a lot of people at the police station. My parents were watching too. Yes, after my mother-in-law and husband disappeared behind the door yesterday, I started checking the baby monitor camera. The police suspected that this whole break-in thing seemed fishy, perhaps even staged. Not just my mother-in-law, but my husband too might be involved, I explained. They guessed right. When I came home, the room was all messy, and you both acted surprised, blaming me for it. You planned to make my parents apologize by saying they didn't want a daughter-in-law who would do something like that. But you didn't want a daughter-in-law at all because we had a baby girl, not a boy. You wanted to replace me with someone else, right? And what's this about an affair approved by the mother-in-law? I said it all quickly, and everyone looked at them coldly. It must be a mistake, my husband said nervously. No way. I would never cheat. Melissa, do you still have more to say? This nonsense. Stop. My mother-in-law, who forgot herself for a moment and got angry, wasn't forgiven by the others. I also refused to accept being judged on such an unfair basis. I don't want a family that doesn't care about how our baby is doing. It's not right that our neighbor, who's been looking after her, shows more love than my own family since I arrived today. I'm going back to my parents' house. And yes, I'll file for divorce and fight for custody of our daughter. It seems that's what you all wanted. No, wait a minute, not to the police station. I don't want to go. Let go, I don't want to. Both of them caused a scene as the police took them away. Afterward, my mother-in-law and husband became infamous in the neighborhood, and not in a good way. They tried to make things right by offering me a divorce settlement, but it didn't help. The rumors had already spread. No matter how much they insisted they paid me, no one believed them. I returned to my parents' house and am raising my daughter with their help. Through a friend's recommendation, I found a job nearby. It's not easy, and I have my worries, but when I see my daughter's smiling face, I feel determined to do my best. I'll work hard to raise Lisa well, making sure she doesn't turn out